Okay, hey everyone, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. We have another cool update for you guys from the brand Spinnaker. About them, their brand offering classic nautical aesthetics in an affordable modern package. Now, in terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in the language you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to find water resistance, typically paired to some type of screw down crown. You want it to be that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Fleuss 40mm automatic, and specifically it is the blue dial with the red bezel colorway, and it's essentially a Blancpain 50 Fathoms inspired diver, now offered in a range of non-limited colorways. These are going to go for $500 directly from the brand, and this sample was kindly provided by Spinnaker for the purposes of this review, but no brand ever has any editorial input on the review, and all of the thoughts and feedback are always my own. So we have seen this, if you guys are fans of the channel or just avid YouTube viewers, we have seen this silhouette released in the past, but in kind of more punchy colorways that were typically going to be quite limited. You know, there was their 50 Fathoms release, etc., that were really these cool limited Seconde collab pieces, and they even had a couple of limited runs with, again, punchier aesthetics in terms of some of the color play. Here they've definitely gone in another direction to offer something a little bit more suitable for day to day. I think they could have even gone even more traditional, but you know, of course they still want to have that fun element to it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments in terms of, do you appreciate when brands go out of their way to kind of make things a little bit funkier and more fun, or would you have preferred to see this in more traditional kind of black on black, blue on blue type of colorways? Let me know in the comments. But with all that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, as you guys can see, you know, for those of you that are big into watch collecting, you're going to recognize these aesthetics from the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. What is going to be quite refreshing is going to be the price point at $500, and that's full price from Spinnaker without using any types of discount codes or anything like that, which typically they are going to have sales and discounts, and you can even get them from dealers as well because they're a relatively large brand. Also, the size-wise, so this is going to have a 40mm diameter, which is really pretty nice. I think it almost even might appear small for some folks that are used to larger watches. I think this in a 41 or a 42 is probably, just thanks to the proportions of this, is probably more its sweet spot. I think the 40mm actually wears a little bit smaller. So for those of you that like smaller watches, this might be the watch for you. It has a really nice thin 11.1mm thickness, again measured from my own calipers, and then lug to lug is going to be at 46.9, or just basically 47mm. Brushed stainless steel here, guys. You're going to have a flat sapphire with a slight boxed edge to it, as you can see. Some people call those top hat sapphires as well. And then you're going to have a 120 click unidirectional rotating bezel that is lumed, and it does have a domed crystal insert, which I assume is going to be mineral, because I feel like they would have advertised if it was sapphire, which the mineral is actually kind of makes more sense for that because of where it is, and with that domed nature, you're going to want something that's going to be a little bit more impact resistance in terms of shattering. So nice, and honestly, you know, getting a scratch on a bezel isn't as big a deal as getting a scratch on a dial where there's space in between, and you're going to be able to see those scratches, versus here probably going to be less noticeable overall if you're able to scratch it. Now, one of the nice things that keeps this nice and thin and actually makes it quite premium is going to be the movement inside. Although you can't see it on through this solid case back, it's actually a Miyota 9039. So really nice, 41-hour power reserve, beating at 4 Hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. Nice screw down crown, which is also nicely signed here. When we get to the dial, nice matte fume dial, as you guys can see. You're getting brushed hands with some painted accents as well, and you're getting Swiss Supernova that does glow green. It's not specified which one they use, but you know, it is, they do specify Swiss Superluminova. I'm not sure which compound, but it does render quite nicely. I like that they didn't use any Fotina in this particular colorway. And yeah, again, it's a kind of going for something that's still fun, still has a bit of a pop, very bright cherry red, but paired to that deep kind of fume gradient dial there. And I think it's a kind of a winning combo. I think the red's a little bright. I would have definitely loved to see this either with a black bezel or a dark blue bezel would have been nice as well. I think the blue on blue would have been fantastic, or black on black with some gilt. Like, there's so many options you could do with stuff like this, and it has been done. I mean, you think about Seiko, they've done, there was their original kind of 55 Fathoms Seiko 5s, and then they reissued those in an SKX type of silhouette, but they retained a lot of the visual aesthetics in terms of the dial and bezel. So I understand why Spinnaker would want to keep this fresh, but guys, if you're listening, the design team at Spinnaker, give the people what they want, even if it's limited. Let's do some iterations and variations that are going to be just a little bit more plain. We can still do the fume. Maybe we still have pops of color in the dial text or something. To really make it original. Maybe make the Fleuss branding, change that in color, and then like use it as an anchor color to go with the secondhand little pop of color there. Who knows? But they don't listen to me. You guys do. But hey, maybe they'll watch this, or maybe you guys will comment and agree, and then they'll see that and they'll produce more. Maybe they'll do an average bros edition here in the future. I think that would be pretty cool. Now, other details, guys, 20 millimeter lug width, which is going to make this very, very versatile for existing straps. And thanks to that thinness, you can use pass-through straps in terms of those NATO nylon style, or of course something like this in the vein of Blancpain. You could put this on a very nice array of options, whether they be tropic rubber style or rubber tropic style straps, or of course sailcloth style straps as well. A lot of them are fashioned out of FKM these days, and you could really upscale this and make it just a little bit more elevated and refined with a simple pairing like that. But I will say the nice thing is, even though it's very versatile with that 20 millimeter lug width, the bracelet itself isn't bad. It's not the greatest. It does have a beautiful taper. This stainless steel beads of rice bracelet, it tapers down to about 16 millimeters, which I think is a nice sweet spot there, because it does come to, of course, a diverse clasp. And then you do have quick release spring bars, nothing fancy, no fancy mechanisms. They just got the little things that poke out. And then we get to this diverse clasp. It is a legit diverse clasp because it has a folding locking mechanism as well as a push button, milled scissor folding section, and then stamped diver's extension. And then you also do get 3 points of manual micro adjustment to dial in that fit. The main drawback, of course, is going to be the fact that these aren't all fully individually articulated grains of rice. They are more so in the shape of the grains of rice, but they're not individual grains, as you guys can see there. So you're not going to get the same level of comfort and articulation you might get with, if you went with a higher spec micro brand, or of course, some mainstream brands on the Swiss side as well. But for the most part, in terms of looks, it's absolutely going to do the job. The construction on here is going to be a split pin construction, so nothing too fancy, which is going to be really easy for adjustment, but at the same time, not as elevated. But at about $500, I think it's okay. And again, if you really wanted to spice this up, dress it up, you could put it on like a really nice tropic rubber strap or a really fine sailcloth, or you could go for the cheap stuff and again just go pure aesthetics. For me, I enjoy sometimes the juxtaposition of the higher end strap against a more affordable watch, especially one that has, even though it's quite affordable, the aesthetic itself is quite rich in heritage, and it does visually recall luxury when I look at it, because of the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. But with all that said, let's go ahead and get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears really well. Look at the thinness. Check that out. A lot of times you pay premium for something that wears this thin. Not to say that $500 is not a lot of money, especially in this economy. But I will say, you know, traditionally when you're thinking of something that's going to give you an aesthetic that exudes, you know, something as classic as this, you know, from a brand that have, you know, legitimate sales and support services, as well as, you know, return policies, warranties, and everything like that. It's pretty nice. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, you're going to notice a fair amount of perspective distortion. The sides of my wrist fall away, and thus so does the sides of the bracelet, making the watch head seem much larger. But if I keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here, you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And now look at that. So much more bracelet on the sides, and then the watch case seems a lot more centered on the top of my wrist, but still beautifully thin, great profile. Now in terms of the finishing there, it's definitely more on the industrial side, you know, although the look has a lot of cues of a luxury aesthetic there, tied to Blancpain. The you know, the finish is going to be a little bit more pedestrian, even in comparison to something like a Seiko 5. Although, to Seiko's credit, they're really well known for overperforming on their cheaper watch models, to where they're known for their casework being quite good. This casework isn't bad by any means, but I don't want to misinterpret this as just like, oh yeah, you're basically getting a 50 Fathoms for $500. You're not. There's definitely trade-offs, but the good news is something that I've learned at my time on YouTube. There's plenty of people who don't care about higher levels of finishing, that don't even care about heritage, that really don't care about much apart from just bullet points on pieces of paper a lot of the times. And if something is within their price point, they're not necessarily fans of brands, they're fans of particular price brackets and wanting to shop within their own means, which is absolutely fair. And it doesn't mean they're less of an enthusiast. They just have, you know, different priorities ultimately that align for themselves. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I have been so flexible in terms of what I'll feature on the channel, because I know that even if something isn't my cup of tea or aligns with where I'm at in my own personal watch collecting journey, there's absolutely other folks who will find stuff like this and be able to derive plenty of value. But with that said, let's go ahead and get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh, look at that. Very nice Lume here. Of course, it's dive watch, so you would expect that, especially one with the you know, design heritage that they've pulled from within that catalog. So nice to see that. I will say, of course, you know, there's only so much Lume that you can put underneath a bezel in terms of layering, and how much room you have there. So the printing there, of course, is going to be applied thinner than the applied indices and the handset, etc. So it's not going to be all uniform, but again, at a watch around $500 full retail, you know, it's up to you in terms of if that's going to be something that bothers you or not. But let me know what you think in the comments. One thing I always do like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes run alike in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see here, look at that dial. It's going to render almost black in certain lighting, and then boom, look at the way the blue comes to life. I really do like that. Of course, that cherry lipstick kind of red is definitely very vibrant. I mean, even in partial lighting, it's going to capture your eye, and it's going to be quite legible. Let's even have a little extra fun. We'll hit it with the black light here, give it a little extra boost, a little power boost, as you guys can see there. So very cool. But at the end of the day, you know, not many people are going to say, hey, I need a dedicated dive watch for scuba diving. Let me go grab a mechanical timepiece. And if you are, it's probably more likely to be something less flashy. Honestly, it's probably going to be a Seiko Turtle. versus something like this, but this will absolutely do the job if you need it. And, you know, again, most dives are going to be, you know, less than 40 meters. So it's not like you're going to be in a pitch black depths. You're not going to be night diving as a, you know, a casual or an amateur diver. Most cases, you don't even need crazy lume. It's just something that's nice to have. And it is nice to see this performing this well here. Again, my mind just goes back to, oof, I wish that they would have done something colorway wise. I think this blue gradient, that blue fume dial, does represent really well. I wish they kind of would have done a matching dark blue bezel. I think that just would have been so cool. Well, again, let me know what you guys think. Some of you guys might be thinking like, hey, Mark, stop. We like the wild stuff. We like the quirkiness. But this is why we want this to look like this, because we don't want people to confuse it with a Blancpain. We want people to know this is the fun version. Which, again, hey, when you think about their 50 Fathoms, you know, special editions, yeah, I get that. You want it to be fun. You want it to pop, be a little different, kind of if you know status. So, hey, I get it. I get it. All right. But so with that said, we'll go ahead and get the lights back on here and get into some closing thoughts. Guys, on the wrist, nice dialed in wear. That really will hit a sweet spot for many wrists. Even me with my larger than average 7.5 inch wrist or 19 centimeter circumference wrist, it worked out really, really well. I'd say, again, it wears a little bit on the smaller side. I think if they sized it up to a 42 or a 41, it might be more of a sweet spot, but that also might just be due to the fact that there's a contrasting dial and bezel, which is going to make the dial seem smaller visually. Again, it has nothing to do with the actual size of the watch, but visual weight does, you know, it comes into play a factor. So if this had a matching dial, matching bezel, probably would have hit a slightly more of the sweet spot for me, but visually it does read a little bit smaller. And again, it's only because I would say the dial and bezel contrast. In terms of model variants, do check the site links in the description for options and availability, as these do kind of come and go in waves. The nice thing is these are meant to be a non-limited production run, so these should restock and restock quite regularly because it's a really cool model. You know, again, you're getting that Miyota, you know, 4 hertz movement, which is fantastic, nice and thin as well. In terms of comparable models, guys, this Spinnaker actually compares surprisingly well against the Swatch Blancpain Scuba 50 Fathoms, which I own and I enjoy quite a bit. But, you know, again, that's made out of bioceramic, which is essentially a very nice and scientific plastic. You know, so this with a full metal construction as well as a hacking 4 hertz movement, I like that a lot. And it still pays homage in the same ways. No, it's not in the same family or group, right? I think, of course, one that has legitimately Blancpain written across the dial, even though it does say Swatch as well, ultimately is going to be a bit more of that recognition to heritage. But at the same time, I think Spinnaker has made a good name for themselves within the enthusiast community now with these fun special editions. So I also, to mention, I kind of mentioned it earlier, this also does compare favorably against the Seiko 5 Sports SRPK97, their 55 Fathoms Homage, offering higher specs for only about $100 difference. So this is slightly more expensive, but again, you're going to have a screw down crown. You're going to have slightly more water resistance. You're going to have as well a you know, sapphire crystal, 4 hertz movement, which is going to be a smoother sweep, etc. Better thinness, proportions, all that stuff. And although not as ambitious as that Seiko 5 might be, it's still good enough for most people that are going to be shopping within this price point. So for me, guys, bottom line, Spinnaker smartly capitalized on their viral 50 Fathoms Seconde limited editions and are now offering up a more versatile daily option edition for those who may be looking for something less whimsical and more wearable, although I do wish they'd still go a bit more traditional and eventually offer even more sedate options, like a simple black dial and black bezel option, or blue on blue, etc., without patinaed lume or funky bright accents. I think that would be great. I hope it's okay, with Spinnaker, that people want that, and it's I don't think it's too unreasonable, especially considering that Blancpain doesn't really offer much comparable. A lot of their stuff is special editions in terms of the sizing that you want on their modern renditions of the 50 Fathoms. So with that said, guys, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like it. If you're ready, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.